And the chairman of the Joint Chiefs briefed reporters on the latest of the operation. This runs about 45 minutes, and then we'll show you the remarks of Tony Blair as he spoke with reporters earlier in the day in Brussels.
On the President's order, coalition forces began the ground war to disarm Iraq and liberate the Iraqi people yesterday. And a few minutes ago, the air war in Iraq began. General Myers will provide some details on the progress of our operation, but first let me comment on the aims and objectives we have for the days ahead. Our goal is to defend the American people and to eliminate Iraq's weapons of mass destruction and to liberate the Iraqi people. Coalition military operations are focused on achieving several specific objectives. To end the regime of Saddam Hussein by striking with force on a scope and scale that makes clear to Iraqis that he and his regime are finished. Next, to identify, isolate, and eventually eliminate Iraq's weapons of mass destruction, their delivery systems, production capabilities, and distribution networks. Third, to search for, capture, drive out terrorists who have found safe harbor in Iraq. Fourth, to collect such intelligence as we can find related to terrorist networks in Iraq and beyond. Fifth, to collect such intelligence as we can find related to the global network of illicit weapons of mass destruction activity. Sixth, to end sanctions and to immediately deliver humanitarian relief, food and medicine to the displaced and to the many needy Iraqi citizens. Seventh, to secure Iraq's oil fields and resources which belong to the Iraqi people and which they will need to develop their country after decades of neglect by the Iraqi regime. And last, to help the Iraqi people create the conditions for a rapid transition to a representative self-government that is not a threat to its neighbors and is committed to ensuring the territorial integrity of that country. The regime is starting to lose control of their country. Yesterday, the Iraqi information minister declared that the port of Qasr is completely in our hands, quote unquote. Quote, they, the coalition forces, failed to capture it, unquote. In fact, coalition forces did capture it and do control the port of Qasr and also a growing portion of the country of Iraq. The confusion of Iraqi officials is growing. Their ability to see what is happening on the battlefield, to communicate with their forces, and to control their country is slipping away. They're beginning to realize, I suspect, that the regime is history. And as that realization sets in, their behavior is likely to begin to tip and to change. Those close to Saddam Hussein will likely begin searching for a way to save themselves. Those whose obedience is based on fear may well begin to lose their fear of him. Officers and soldiers in the field will increasingly see that their interests lie not in dying for a doomed regime, but in helping the forces of Iraq's liberation. To those in the Iraqi chain of command, some words of advice. Do not obey regime orders to use weapons of mass destruction. Do not obey orders to use innocent civilians as human shields. Do not follow orders to destroy any more of Iraq's oil wells, or to blow up dams, or to flood villages. Those who carry out such orders will be found and will be punished. We are especially grateful for the direct military involvement of the forces of Great Britain and Australia and Poland and so many other countries. And we are deeply grateful for the support of each of the now 45 nations that have publicly associated themselves with the coalition effort in Iraq. We did not choose this war. Saddam Hussein was given a choice by the international community. Give up your weapons of mass murder or lose power. He chose unwisely and now he will lose both. As in Afghanistan, our objective in Iraq is not conquest or colonization. Iraq belongs to the Iraqi people. Our objective is to bring down a regime that threatens the American people with weapons of mass destruction and create conditions where Iraqis can establish a new government, one that respects the rights of its diverse population and the aspirations of all Iraqis to live in freedom and to choose their own leaders. To American forces and those of our coalition partners, let me say this.
Media with the SEALs, and their reports should be out shortly. I also have a graphic, I think, as they'll bring it up, and it's up now. Good. Coalition ships boarded 3 Iraqi tugboats in the Khor Abdallah waterway and found weapons, uniforms, and mines. Over 130 mines, including influence mines, were...
Just before coming down, after the air campaign began in earnest about 1 o'clock, I saw some of the images on television, and I heard various commentators expansively comparing what's taking place in Iraq today to some of the more famous bombing campaigns of World War II. There is no comparison. The weapons that are being used today have a degree of precision that no one ever dreamt of in a prior conflict. They didn't exist. And it's not a handful of weapons, it's the overwhelming majority of the weapons that have that precision. The targeting capabilities and the care that goes into targeting to see that the precise targets are struck and that other targets are not struck is as impressive as anything anyone could see. The care that goes into it, the humanity that goes into it, to see that military targets are destroyed, to be sure, but that it's done in a way and in a manner and in a direction and with a weapon that is appropriate to that very particularized target. And I think that the comparison is unfortunate and inaccurate. And I think that will be found to be the case when ground truth is achieved. I would add also that I think we're probably watching something that is somewhat historic. We're having a conflict at a time in our history when we have 24 hours a day television, radio, media, internet, and more people in the world have access to what is taking place. You couple that with the hundreds, literally hundreds of people in the free press, the international press, the press of the United States, from every aspect of the media, who have been offered and accepted an opportunity to join and be connected directly with practically every aspect of this campaign. And what we are seeing is not the war in Iraq. What we're seeing are slices of the war in Iraq. We're seeing that particularized perspective that reporter or that commentator or that television camera happens to be able to see at that moment. And it is not what's taking place. What you see is taking place, to be sure, but it is one slice, and it is the totality of that is what this war is about and being made up of. And I doubt that in a conflict of this type there's ever been the degree of free press coverage as you are witnessing in this instance. Sir, the way you've put it, the answer is no. If you're thinking, is there country-to-country dialogue taking place? And the answer is no. If you're asking, is there contact between coalition forces and Iraqi forces, the answer is most certainly. There has been over the past period of weeks, and those discussions have intensified, but they tend to be particularized to a specific unit in a specific location.
So in terms
of scraps of information, and you can be certain if I had a sufficient number of scraps that it began to make a persuasive case that I would opine on it.
You characterize the command and control.
Solid evidence that it doesn't exist, we have to assume that it is in place and functioning in one way or another. Our hope, our expectation is that they probably had multiple methods of communicating through their command and control system. They had redundant systems. And so to the extent we are successful in eliminating some, our expectation is that even if it's simply couriers, they will have the ability to communicate. I think it's a stretch to think it's possible to eliminate their ability to communicate up and down through their command system. Our hope and our prayer is not that we'll get 100% of their ability to communicate, but rather that we will be persuasive enough with the people who would have to implement the orders of the senior people in that regime and persuade them that it is clearly not in their interest to obey those types of orders. No question but that the strike on that leadership headquarters was successful. We have photographs of what took place. The question is what was in there, and until we gather sufficient information and intelligence and have more than one source that gives us conviction, we have to assume that the operation is proceeding. Certainly too late for them to stay in power. What they do with themselves is up to them, and what the people around them do with them is up to the people around them. But it's I guess time will tell what kinds of judgments they'll make. So far, they've made very poor judgments.
What precisely?
Oh, I don't need to give advice to that. They know precisely what to do. While it has to be a terribly unpleasant circumstance, we'll have an opportunity to see the precision with which we're going about this task, and that the targets are military targets, and that we attack on the Iraqi people has refused to disarm peacefully. Yes. It's important to remember that this attack is against today is as targeted an air campaign as has ever existed.
But it makes it more likely to be civilian casualties, isn't that right? If you're talking
we have analyzed it. Every single target has been analyzed, and the weapon has been carefully selected, and the direction in which the weapon is delivered has been carefully examined, and the time of day when there is the greatest prospect of minimizing any innocent lives, it is an enormously impressive effort, a humane effort, to do what is necessary to reduce this threat against our country and that region, and to eliminate a regime that has killed hundreds of thousands of human beings. Just 1 second. I think it should be added that the Turkish forces go in and out of our northern part of Iraq and have for years, and they may have some forces.
In fact, they have had some forces in northern Iraq for some time, not associated with what's going on right now.
But in terms of any large numbers, they are not.
You've repeatedly emphasized the importance of oil. Yes.
The decision to go ahead with the ground campaign and the air campaign was a direct result of the fact that the 48-hour ultimatum expired and the Saddam Hussein and his crowd did not leave the country. It is after still additional time, in the hope that one might find a large number of senior military people making a conscious decision that they would prefer to act with honor and separate themselves from that regime. When that did not happen, the only choice one has is to proceed and use coercion. It was the absolute last choice after every single other thing that could be done had been done.
So, Mr. Chair, is a second deadline issued then for the senior Iraqi official to surrender by a certain time?
No, there was no certain time. There was time provided, as you are well aware. The President spoke, I believe, and gave a 48-hour ultimatum on Monday, Eastern Standard Time, 8:14. It came out of his mouth. By Wednesday, 48 hours had expired. Today is, Friday. The ground campaign began last evening, about 10 o'clock. and the air campaign began today about 1 o'clock. We have been issuing through a variety of methods, communications urging the Iraqi military to surrender. And it apparently, what we have done thus far has not been sufficiently persuasive that they would have done that. It may very well be that with the initiation of the ground war last evening and the initiation of the air war this afternoon, that we may find people responding and surrendering. You could not answer that question the way you phrased it, yes. There are forces that have surrendered. There are forces that have had discussions about the possibility of helping. But to my knowledge, there are none that have turned in quite the way you're describing it. There have been a variety of views offered on that subject, and a lot of them tend to cluster around the idea that the most serious period would be if the Iraqi regime did not flee and the forces got close to where they likely are in Baghdad or Tikrit, and the closer they got, the greater the danger of that. We don't. That's been more a theory on the part of outsiders rather than a theory on the part of insiders through interrogation or communications of utilizing the other ways.
General Frank, excuse me, are you moving to protect the oil fields around Kush?
It was the Iraqis' people's oil. It's part of the wealth of their country. It would be a crime to destroy those fields. We've had lots of intelligence that suggested that explosives were being moved into those areas and that there was a risk that the Iraqi regime would do what they did to the Kuwaiti oil fields, and that it was an environmental disaster. We, as General Myers said, have control over a non-trivial fraction of the oil wells in the south. And we're fortunate to say that because of the speed with which that was done, there looks to be only about 10 wells that we know of out of possibly 1,000 in that area that have been damaged. Several are still on fire. Several are pouring oil onto the ground. We would intend to, in fairly short order, have the people that know how to repair those wells in there and putting the fires out and fixing the ones that are still spilling on the ground. An intelligence gathering platform, and we use it along with dozens of other platforms, and they're all helpful. The stance of the Iraqi forces are quite different. The capabilities of the United States of America are quite different. I think that expecting that you're going to find a cookie mold fit between two events that are so substantially different and separated in time by such a long period of time and so many advances in technologies and a notably different purpose. The purpose then was to remove them from Kuwait. The purpose now is quite different. The United States and the coalition forces have taken every conceivable step, diplomatic, economic, and ultimatum, and a careful, measured beginning. What we are currently doing could not, by any stretch of the imagination, fit what you just said. It would be it would be to misunderstand everything that's taking place. We have special forces and units connected to Kurdish forces in the north, in answer to your question, and you can be certain that we have advised the Turkish government and the Turkish armed forces that it would be notably unhelpful if they went into the north in large numbers.
The United States has made that's now making Turkey say, well, then you can't fly through our airspace?
There apparently were a lot of issues involved, and that may very well be one of them, but over a period of, 3 or 4 months now that these discussions have been going on, my impression is that the discussions are pretty much towards an end.
And is the Fourth ID out of this fight, at least from Turkey in the north?
That's up to Tom Franks, and he'll make judgments about that in good time, and I guess time will tell how many forces will actually be needed on the ground, but there are other ways to bring them in than Turkey.
Have you found any